When he smiled, you smiled too, and enjoyed smiling in his company. At the moment, most of our meetings in Agartha are about helping our Earth neighbors, Saint Germain resumed. This boy, he was indicating me, will help us. He hasn't been here long and has just married our Cizala. Everyone cheered, and I could feel myself blushing. Manal saved the day. We're on a field trip, he called. Please may we return for further information at a later date. We bowed low and respectfully to the distinguished assembly, and Manal and I retreated. Titch didn't. He circled the whole table, sniffing at each person being patted and licking in return. When he came back to us, he stood up on his hind legs, a gesture which denoted approval. He was entitled to the ensuing applause. The loyal, or previously programmed, hovercraft was waiting for us. I felt exhausted after the council meeting, and Manal suggested that we should continue the next day. Thus I hurried home to my waiting wife. I'm coming with you today, declared Cizala. She was standing at the foot of the bed, and the morning light swathed her like a glittering, shimmering aura. We're going to the Bridge of Mists, the boundary between Telos and its surroundings and the enormous country of the fifth dimension. You've been to Shambhala. Well, very briefly indeed, I replied. I'd like to see more of it. You will, darling. My parents live there, and we are going to visit. At long last, I thought. I hope they'll like me. What if they don't like me? Then they'll dissolve our love union sensitively. But it won't happen. We love each other, and that's the most important thing for them. Love is paramount from the fifth dimension upwards. Agartha is love. Hurry up and get changed, I've ordered a hovercraft. Titch is coming with us. Titch wolfed down his breakfast of vegetarian dog food, which he had come to enjoy. I don't think he'd forgotten the meat he used to eat, but Titch is probably the only Great Dane alive who lives on vegetables and appreciates them. I hadn't seen many dogs of his size here, but then again, I hadn't seen many animals here at all. I dressed in a white shirt and white trousers and put a diamond-studded white collar on Titch. Cizala was in a pink creation with a matching wide-brimmed hat. She looked amazing. We entered the hovercraft, which immediately gained altitude. My grandmother used to sing this Swedish marching song, "In summer sunny glow, through woods and fields we go, worries we do not know, singing all the way, hooray, hooray." I whistled it now as the ground disappeared and we ascended to a good height. I'm actually pretty good at whistling. My wife gave me an amused look. That was a lovely tune, she smiled and said. I can play more old Swedish songs on the piano, I replied, if we can get hold of one. I know which instrument you mean, returned Cizala. We can probably create one if you like. I hadn't thought of that, but this was obviously the land of opportunities. I decided to create a grand piano at home as soon as possible. Creative forces were unrestrained here in Agartha, as long as they were positive. This was something I'd learned right from my first time here, otherwise I wouldn't have had a bed to sleep in. Cizala had created a lovely home for us. It was pretty, cozy, and practical. The hovercraft headed downwards and landed in a place so misty that you could hardly see your hand in front of your face. Titch walked close to me, he didn't like being out of sight. Cizala waved both hands and the fog dissipated slightly so that we could make out the bridge we were standing on, with its tall, carved railings reaching up and forming an archway above us. Under the bridge ran clear rapids, culminating in a small waterfall a little further downstream. I could just make out the contours of a forest on either side. We are on the bridge which separates the third and fifth dimensions, she announced. You mean the third and fourth dimensions? I suggested. No, I mean the third and the fifth. The fourth doesn't exist here, she replied. It sounded strange to me, but I let it go for now. I didn't realize how soon I would find out more. The Bridge of Mists furnished us with wet feet and shrouded us in fog, yet in some way it was delightful. I had the feeling that this was the entrance to something amazing. The air was not as damp and close as the name of the bridge implied. It was as though the mists became part of us, a magic charm, an illusion created as we crossed over. It was a long bridge, and as our feet glided across the wet planks, the air around us lightened. We held hands so that we wouldn't slip. Titch was right at my side on a short lead. Suddenly, as if someone had pulled up a blind, or the curtain was rising at the theater, the mist vanished and there was a beautiful view. We were no longer on the bridge, but hovering above golden gravel, glittering in the sunshine beaming down onto the magnificent town of Shambhala. I recognized the towers and pinnacles rising towards the light which flashed from the precious stones used to build the town. It was so lovely it brought tears to my eyes, and I don't even like cities. My wife covered my eyes with her hands and then stroked my head, from the crown down to my ears, mumbling something the whole time. Another strange transformation took place. The air was full of sound. I could see attractive, shimmering people moving along the same golden road with us, and I could hear them talking to each other in another language. Many had pets with them and they looked and smiled at Titch, who didn't growl, but eyed them slightly suspiciously in return. It was as busy as any city, yet somehow lovely and calm. "To directed your thinking and understanding into the fifth dimension," said Cecila. "You can't stay here with me without becoming part of the whole. Now you'll be able to talk to anybody without even moving your lips. Don't be worried about not understanding the language, as your brain will process it as easily as any other conversation." She had hardly finished speaking when a young couple stopped us. "We were just admiring your dog," the man said in my head. "We've never seen that breed before. Where do you come from?" And, hey presto, I only needed to think the answer, and the man understood at once. The woman crouched down to Titch, who licked her hand politely. "A Great Dane," she echoed with a smile. "We have learned the names of most countries on the surface, and Denmark is no exception." "Are the people there especially big?" I couldn't help laughing as I thought of the short, good-natured Danes I have met, and all four of us ended up chuckling, and then Titch stood to attention, which caused even more laughter. However, my wife now bade farewell to the couple and we hurried on. It wasn't long before we had crossed many streets and were by a grand house set in a wonderful garden with a sparkling, woven gate. My wife pressed a button and the gate opened. As we strode along the path of precious stones, I noticed that, while the garden held an array of plants, they were somewhat chaotically displayed. Everything seemed to bloom where it wanted, without design. It was a wild kind of beauty which only nature can achieve. We knocked on the great door and heard the latch click open. We entered. A massive, roofless hall where leafy branches entwined unimpeded around the walls. "Welcome to my parents' home," called my wife, gesturing with arms wide. The dreaded moment was upon us. There they were, the two people who must be my in-laws. I don't know how they got there, the hall had been empty moments before. "Neil," hissed Cecila between her teeth. She bowed so low that her wide-brimmed, pink hat fell off. That got a laugh. Her father raised me up with both hands and looked deep into my eyes. Then he pulled me towards him and welcomed me with a pat on the back. "I can see you're a good man," he said, as I faced him shyly. Not that I'm usually shy, but he was incredibly impressive. He had the air of a master, I reflected without really knowing how a master would look. He was an upright man with huge charm. His wavy, white hair reached his shoulders and he had a straight mustache and short beard. His eyes were as deep blue as the Atlantic. "I'm Feo, and you can call me that, as we have no other titles apart from father and mother. We'll have some tea and a chat in just a moment, but first I'd like you to meet my wife. Her name's Keela." I knelt at once to Cecila's mother. She was exceedingly pretty, and I could see the similarity to my wife. She wasn't as tall as her husband, and her gleaming, silvery white hair, piled high on her head, was interlaced with pearls. She wore a white dress and over it a cloak of midnight blue shimmering like the night sky. She commanded respect, but wasn't gentle and friendly like her daughter. Gravely, this austere lady looked me right in the eye and said, "I hope you fulfill our desire for a loving, devoted son-in-law. I like what I see, and bid you welcome. You may kiss my hand." She held out a slender, finely shaped hand with rings on each finger. I kissed it, narrowly avoiding a shiver. She emanated coldness in the same way as my wife emanates warmth. When I arose, she and Cecil withdrew, and my father-in-law beckoned me to follow him. We went upstairs and entered a place like an atrium from ancient days. Feo invited me to sit on a sofa. Although I knew how to create certain products, I don't know how he did it. On the table suddenly a lovely tea set and a plate of sandwiches and cakes appeared. "Don't be scared of my wife," he smiled, patting my knee. "Everybody is. She can be offish with strangers, but deep inside, she has a heart of gold." I had my own opinion about that, but I said nothing. I really liked Feo. "It feels strange to be in the fifth dimension without going through the fourth," I ventured. Feo guffawed. "Didn't Cecila explain to you, Tim?" he asked. "She should have, but maybe she couldn't find the right words. You already know about our religion here, we all share the same belief, without exception." I have to include the surface in my answer. You know there is about to be a tremendous transformation there. 3 dimensions encompass height, width, and depth. If we add time to these three, we are into the fourth dimension, where we can consider time from outside. Unconsciously, and this is important, people on the surface are passing from the fourth to the fifth dimension, where full consciousness reigns. This goes a long way in explaining people's current confusion, the stress, curious decisions, time that rushes away, karma which is immediately balanced, and so forth. The strangest thing of all is that surface dwellers have the opportunity to progress directly from the third to the fifth dimension. They have been submerged for 13,000 years in the third dimension, manipulated by the Anunnaki. The bells of freedom are ringing for them now. The time of reincarnation is past, and life will become part of the whole. According to legend, the Anunnaki was a group of Sumerian and Babylonian gods from the planet Nibiru. Their leader was called Anu. He craved power and wanted to rule the earth. He planned to enslave the existing population and succeeded beyond expectation, with slavery lasting for thousands of years. He controlled humanity and managed to convince people he was their god. The dark forces at his command acted as slaves, and the blossoming, loving earth, created in the beginning by a different god, was weakened by his tyranny. He prevented distinguished inventors like Tesla and Murray from completing their inventions by destroying them. He exercised total control over any undesirable development which threatened his power. People were unaware of his existence and influence until recently. Only now is the veil of darkness being torn asunder and light finally penetrating. In the third dimension, which we want them to leave, there are opposing energies like good and bad, love and hate, joy and grief, and above all, life and death. In higher dimensions these don't exist. Your controlling ego no longer dominates your world. Instead, the higher self takes over, and the creation and the unity dominate in everyone. In short, the fourth dimension is the astral plane, populated by ghosts and specters. I was overwhelmed. I just about managed to say thank you, and my father-in-law smiled indulgently. For those who have lived on the surface most of their lives, this is strange news indeed, whereas we have been aware of this since childhood. We need to be able to explain to earthlings where they are when they get here. They can forget all about the fourth dimension. It has a certain type of clientele, and some earthlings may choose to move there. That is their business. There is still free will on earth. We will assist those who wish it. We take into account the choice of the individual. What a job. I groaned. There are many of us, my father-in-law said, smiling, a great many, and we will achieve our goal. You've already noticed that Agartha is a pleasant place to live, free from toxins and evil. So the fourth dimension is the astral world, I mumbled. Yes, and now you know, you've no need to dwell on it any further. We have other things to discuss, your immediate duty here, for instance. Have you decided what work you will do? Aren't I going to be some kind of liaison between Agartha and the surface? I suggested uncertainly. It just so happens that I am chairman of the Great Circle here in Shambhala, and as my son-in-law, you are entitled to a position among us. Of course, this is your choice, but we would not appreciate you commuting between the surface and Cizala, who would be left on her own. It would be better for you to stay here and make your home in Shambhala or somewhere nearby. What would the job involve? I inquired, quaking inwardly. Would I have to leave grandmother and my friends in Telos? Didn't I already have work there with Manal? As you are well acquainted with the Earth's surface, its inhabitants, its history, and its countries, your mission here would be as Earth's ambassador, as you call it. You would partake in all things pertaining to the Earth. What do you think? It sounds just like what Manal suggested recently, but without the incessant travel, I cried in delight. I accept without hesitation. Then that's all arranged. My father-in-law patted my shoulder in contentment. It means you don't have to travel to the surface, at least, only occasionally. You may live where you want, but your office will naturally be in Telos, as surface dwellers tend to arrive there first. There will be problems to solve. You'll interview earthlings and assess their suitability for immigration. You are welcome to have an assistant, as you will certainly need one. May I have Manal? I asked eagerly, and my father-in-law agreed at once. TM on a study trip just at the moment, I continued. What should we do about that? Carry on. You need to learn as much as you can, replied Feo. Then we'll initiate you into the fifth dimension. That's an obvious stipulation for this kind of work. Hello, ladies. My mother-in-law and wife appeared suddenly out of nowhere. They were both very cheerful, and I noticed that my mother-in-law's laugh rang out as happily as my wife's. She came and gave me a big hug, at last. We have to go home, Cizala announced, because we are about to receive VIPs from the surface. You and I must welcome Cardinal Riemfert from the Vatican. The hovercraft was waiting at the door, and we bid each other a hasty farewell. Titch seemed very relieved to be going home. His charm hadn't been fully appreciated in this place, so he licked any part of me he could find and flopped down beside me in the vehicle with a deep sigh. 24. The Cardinal from the Vatican. Congratulations. Your new job starts now, with a celebrity from the Vatican, my wife teased, as we alighted from the hovercraft. Manuel was waiting at home for us, with Valencio and a well-groomed man of medium height in a suit. I realized this must be Cardinal Riemfert. It crossed my mind that I ought to genuflect. I scanned his face, which was gentle and friendly, pale, with a slightly prominent nose and expressive eyes. There were finely drawn lines around his eyes and mouth. His head was clean-shaven, apart from a ring of graying hair on his crown. He seemed very pleasant. He was wearing a mauve shirt and a well-tailored suit of gray. I didn't have time to kneel. As a non-Catholic, it's a difficult decision. To my surprise, he knelt elegantly and kissed my hand. Good grief, I thought, falling back on my grandmother's expression, is the man mad? Thank you. He cried in faultless English, rising swiftly. I am most grateful to you for looking after my ward, Valencio. I guessed as soon as he disappeared that he would come here, as I had just told him about Agartha, never having been here myself. When I was young, before I became a prelate, I met a sailor who recounted stories about your country, and I have always wanted to visit. The Pope gave me the task of finding the boy and asking him to return. The Pope can never openly acknowledge his paternity, but I can help Valencio, if he wants to come home. I have tried to be a father to him since he was born. Valencio would be brought up as a cardinal, but we will respect his wishes. I took the old gentleman's arm and led him into the house. My wife managed to produce a cup of strong coffee, which the prelate drank with pleasure. Would your eminence care to see more of this country inside the earth? I asked, still shaken that the old priest had knelt to me. Titch sniffed at the cardinal, licked his hand, and sat down beside him. As usual, my sensible dog demonstrated his positive feelings. Thank you, I would like that. Riemfert nodded and smiled. It would be delightful. I may wish to stay. The inner workings of the Vatican are becoming too much for me. My son is here and has already expressed a desire to remain here. And, as far as I understand, you believe in the same God, don't you? Cecila replied, the light of the Creator derives from the inexhaustible source, the source of life. We live in unison with the source, the light, and each other. Together, these represent God's love for us. Said the cardinal thoughtfully. I've never heard it put like that before, but it sounds fine. I can agree with that without any qualms. I'm grateful to be allowed to stay here a few days and get to know you better, with Valencio, or Fal as I usually call him. I can undertake to show your eminence around, said Manuel, who had been as quiet as a mouse until now, sitting beside the prelate. We have priests who can elaborate on our spiritual philosophy. And anyway, you should experience our wonderful countryside. There's a good guest house in Telos where you could stay. If I could stay with Valencio, then I would happily accept. The cardinal rose, bowing first to my wife and then to me. He accompanied Manuel to the hovercraft. He'll want to stay here, remarked my wife with satisfaction. What a nice man. I hurried to grandmother with news of the visit. She and her new husband Lex were eating lunch in the garden when I turned up. Grandmother hugged me. My dear boy, she exclaimed. I was beginning to wonder where you'd got to. We've been to some very exciting places, including a botanical garden with plants from the surface. Imagine that. There were coltsfoot, blue anemones, lilies of the valley, and many more of my favorites. I told them about the Pope's son and his guardian, the cardinal, meeting up here, and that the cardinal was considering staying. Grandmother was jubilant. What lovely people there are here. She laughed. We must throw a party. I have to meet a real cardinal. I would like to tell him what religion is really about. Lex and I exchanged glances. Neither of us planned to let grandmother loose. The Wesak celebrations are upon us, Lex observed. Apparently, it's a holiday we share with the surface. It's a celebration of the birth of the Buddha and his enlightenment, a tribute to the light. Never heard of it, I replied. It's completely passed me by up there and down here. Pretty much like God. How do the two gods compare? By being exactly the same, replied Lex dryly. There's no difference at all. We are surrounded by the Great Spirit and the Source, united in an indivisible whole, the unity. He've never been very involved in religion, I confessed, slightly embarrassed. I didn't realize they had a proper religion here. Let's call it belief, Lex pointed out. The concept of religion is overused, and isn't used here. I wonder where education takes place here, especially higher education, said grandmother. I know that small children learn in Porthalagos, but there must be other types of education, and even vocational training. There is, I replied. There are centers of education, like our universities, all over the place. Great, exclaimed grandmother. I was thinking of Valencio. It wouldn't do him any harm to continue his studies. I'm sure it's fine to be conversant with Armenian, Latin, and other ancient languages, but he needs licking into shape, as well as general knowledge about the surface and the fifth dimension, which Lex and I are working on. You know, I've always been interested in magic, and white magic is 5-dimensional. Actually, that's what I'm learning with Manol, I concurred. I'm learning from him and an old fellow called Arniel. Grandmother laughed. They're obviously not teaching you humility, she remarked. But maybe that will come later when you are 5-dimensional. I'm partly there already, I replied, sulking a little. I am married to a 5-dimensional woman. To my grandmother's delight, I recounted the story of our visit to Cecil's parents. Lex told me I had become part of a family with ancient roots and traditions, and that it would be just as well if I hurried home to celebrate. I bade them a hasty farewell. I had to look after the cardinal and accompany my wife to the festivities. Maybe I could combine both things. The cardinal, Valencio, and my friend Manol were all in the living room waiting for me. Manol rushed over to embrace me. He've ordered us a hovercraft, he declared. We're going to show Cardinal Riumfort one of our finest traditions. I think he'll be impressed. This last sentence he whispered in my ear with a big smile. I looked at the cardinal. He was in full clerical garb, complete with a funny, little, tasseled hat, and a purple silk hood covered in embroidery. I bowed low to the venerable vision. He gave me a friendly smile. I don't know where we're going, he said, so it's just as well if people can see who I am. Clerical clothes may not be of any interest in this country, Manol observed gently, but your eminence looks so elegant, it would be a shame not to show off these wonderful vestments. Val, as we now called Valencio, looked a bit embarrassed. His white jeans were dirty and his blue checked shirt crumpled. He had been playing with the children and hadn't had time to change. My wife came to the rescue. She produced a perfect white suit, silk shirt, and a tie, and presented them to him. There. She smiled. I'm sure they'll fit. There's no shortage of clothes here. You can change in the bedroom. Tim is going to change, too. I've laid out his clothes on the bed. Go on, off you go, you two. I was to wear the traditional Agran folk costume, shimmering natural silk trousers, a beautiful embroidered shirt with inset stones, and an exquisite, broad belt with bejeweled embroidery. These belts are worth mentioning, skillfully executed gold squares with a multitude of precious stones illustrating images from Agartha's history. They also indicate the history of the wearer. I don't feel great, whispered Val as we changed. Uncle Luigi, the cardinal, wants me to return to the Vatican with him, and he's really stubborn. He won't budge. But he said he wanted to stay. I burst out in surprise. Has he changed his mind? He was just pretending to keep me happy. Oh, please help me. I don't want to go back. I want to stay and make a future for myself here. He stopped talking as the cardinal came in with Manol. We're going now. Hurry up. Emily and her husband are coming with us as they're not sure where we're going. There's a party venue, you see. Come on. We ran swiftly out of the house and jumped into the hovercraft with a boisterous dog. Titch took up a lot of room, but I couldn't deny him the trip. The celebration area was enormous. I can't do it justice with a description, as you couldn't see from one end to the other, and it was filled to overflowing with milling people. It was like a huge bowl of rice pudding, as most people were dressed in white, and many women had white headscarves. These scarves were braided imaginatively and sparkled with jewels. I have never seen the like, or imagined anything as amazing. In the middle of the crowd was a circular arena like a circus. As we arrived, a path opened up through the throng, and people bowed and waved. Why are we allowed through? I whispered to Cecila. They can see your belt, she replied. Only people who work on the council have a belt like that. I had no idea. Questions filled my head as we were led to the arena and invited to be seated. Cecilia's parents were there, to my surprise, and many faces I recognized from my field trip to the council chamber. Arniel appeared and welcomed us all. We always have a major meeting at Wesak, he explained. Everyone comes who can, as there will be songs, speeches, and plays. I looked around. We were sitting in a ring on plump, white sofas, around a large empty area in the middle. Suddenly, there was a man on a gilded podium. He had light brown hair and beard and the most clear dark blue eyes I've ever seen. He smiled, radiating love and beauty. My beloved citizens, sisters and brothers, he called. We are gathered here this evening to celebrate the love of the light and the source, as we usually do. May all facets of the light be within us and be a glowing connection with God. Here the prelate from the Vatican stood up and in a voice of thunder called, "And Jesus Christ, the only Son of God." The man on the podium turned his bearded face towards the cardinal. Smiling, he remarked, "You're new here, aren't you? Otherwise you'd know that I'm Jesus, known as Christ on the surface, and I'm one of the masters of Shambhala. None of us wants to claim to be the only son or any other distinction. Nobody prays to us. The only one who lights up heaven is God, who reigns supreme and is the source of all creation. For us, there is only one." "Blasphemy!" bellowed the cardinal, bright red in the face. "I don't believe for one moment that you are Jesus Christ." As if he would be underground talking to every Tom, Dick, and Harry. "You are blaspheming against everything which is holy by posing as the Son of God. That was your suggestion, not mine." There was an icy edge to Jesus's voice now. "Would you recognize a physical manifestation of Jesus? I'm afraid you're in troubled waters, my friend. Everyone here knows I'm Jesus, Saint Germain is Saint Germain, and Melchizedek is Melchizedek, and that we, and many others who are masters, exist in the fifth dimension in Shambhala." "Oh sure," raged the prelate, getting angrier. "If you lived there, you'd be over 2,000 years old. You're all liars. The worst thing is that the whole populace seems to believe your fanciful assertions." He swung his head angrily so that the small cap with the large tassel arrangement ended up perched rakishly over one ear. The audience roared with laughter and we joined in. Val went and pulled his uncle by the arm. "Come on, Uncle Luigi, there's no point in this. We're going home tomorrow," hissed the cardinal, "and you are coming too, if I have to carry you." I had no idea that the renowned paradise of Shambhala was a den of swindlers and rogues. I should never have come. I'm glad to have found you, my son. Now you'll return with me and read for the priesthood. I'm sure the Pope has a fine position up his sleeve for you." "Really?" Val was seething with barely concealed anger. "If you think I'm going to take up some sham position, you're a misguided bunch in the Vatican. I'm not coming. I'm staying here." "We'll see about that," said the cardinal in a tone of superiority. I heard this exchange and decided the boy needed support. Jesus stepped down from the podium and my whisper to him left him grinning from ear to ear. He nodded in affirmation. The cardinal was looking grim. He was dragging a reluctant Val by the arm, trying to forge a path through the crowd. He hadn't learned to hover, and people were moving aside with cheerful shouts and friendly pats on his embroidered shoulder. A lovely, lively, red-headed young girl took the liberty of rearranging the cardinal's cap and waved to Val. "Here's someone who wants to meet you," she said. "It's important, and work-related." "He's going nowhere," mumbled the cardinal. "He's going back to the hotel in this god-forsaken country." The girl, however, put her hand upon his, which was holding Valencio in a grip of iron. The priest's fingers relinquished Valencio's sleeve, and our highly esteemed prelate began to disappear. In a moment, the cardinal and his dazzling outfit had completely vanished. Jesus and I were standing a short way off with a surprised Italian boy. "The cardinal is back in the Vatican," Jesus explained. "I sent him home as his behavior was not conducive to our festive blessing. Would you like to go with Cardinal Riemfort, Valencio?" Valencio shook his head vigorously. He had grasped the red-headed girl's hand, and Titch, despite the crush, was trying to jump up and climb on them. Jesus climbed back onto the podium, laughing, and waved to an invisible orchestra, which commenced a wonderful melody. People danced where they could, mostly with their feet on the ground and arms around each other, swaying to the beat. An exceedingly beautiful rainbow became the background for an energetic song. I watched the two young people obviously getting acquainted. Val looked at the girl, and she looked at him. I remembered meeting Cecilia for the first time, that was also at a dance. "That's Arniel's daughter," someone whispered in my ear. "Her name's Tyra. She'll look after Val, don't worry." It was Manal who had caught me up. Titch had found me straight away, of course. We returned to the white sofa next to the podium. The rest of the evening was like a dream. I thought there would be lots of boring speeches, but there weren't. Wall-to-wall songs and dances of a quality the Metropolitan would have envied. It's difficult to find words to describe that night. I held my wife's hand, grandmother held Lex's, and Val held Tora's. We were provided delicious food and cakes and drank the typical Agarthan wine. The crowds thinned as the evening progressed, and we enjoyed everything. The air was pleasantly warm and heavy with the aroma of flowers and herbs. Enough to make one doze off. 26. Visiting an Agarthan orphanage. Val didn't appear to miss his guardian. He often came around to chat and to drink tea. Sometimes Tyra came with him. She turned out to be a singer and actor and a very happy, kind girl. There was definitely something between them. I wished them luck with all my heart. Some days later, I was in the garden early one morning. Cecil was still asleep and I was in the arbor listening to the birds. Titch was with me, of course. I reflected on all I'd seen since the awful shipwreck and losing my father. I thought back to the training here in Telos and meeting my dear Cecila. I considered all the new friends and new experiences here, and felt happy and grateful that I was still me, a little wiser possibly, and not cold and dead on the seabed. Another life had awaited me, in a different place, in another dimension. Actually, I have never felt as alive as I do here and now. Manal and Valencio came to collect me for the day's lesson. Sitting in the hovercraft, Val inquired, I think about angels sometimes and wonder if there are angels here, and if not, where are they? Are we angels, even though we think we are alive? Some people do become angels, like the Holy Madonna and the saints, don't they? You have to stop thinking like a Catholic. Manal scolded him. There is no religion here, just a belief in the infinite creator. Angels are a race in the fifth dimension, not dead people who have been transformed. That idea is completely erroneous, although I know many surface dwellers believe it. They hope to become angels when they die. That is not how it works. Angels are certainly incredibly helpful, good beings who are responsible for helping humans. They walk between dimensions and are very wise and sensible. The Bible, which mentions angels, is a book like any other, a mixture of imagination and unverified history which surface dwellers have decided to put on a pedestal and worship. Not everything in it is true. Not all an author writes is true. XKKK Excuse me, Mariana, we don't mean you. Tim remarked, smiling. What is written in this book and what I'm conveying to you is actually true? The surface dwellers need to know that we really exist. We'll provide physical proof soon, but I don't know when. It will happen. We'll come back to that later. XKKK Will I be able to meet an angel? Asked Val. Perhaps, replied Manal. It all depends on you. You have a lot to learn first. As you know by now, there's not only life on Earth, I interjected. There are different forms of life across the whole universe, and basic human life is similar, even if the Creator gave it slightly varied forms. There is human life, if I may call it that, on many planets other than Earth. This was difficult for a newcomer like Val to grasp, and I could relate to that. I had seen so much evidence to back up my claims that there was no doubt left in my mind. He was silent now, but he'd soon see proof. The hovercraft stopped. From a large round building of gemstones a crowd of children flowed forth. They boarded the hovercraft and threw themselves at us. They kissed us and hugged us and patted us where they could. Manal burst out laughing. I wanted to show you an orphanage in Telos, he said, grinning. This is the ultimate hands-on experience. Calm down, kids, and we'll get out. The children retreated quickly, a group of happy, noisy, completely normal children. I wanted to show you an Agarthan orphanage, he resumed. It might be less rowdy now. Come on in. For once, Titch seemed subdued. There were children swarming all over him. He knew he was too large for even the tallest child to pet his back, and realized that it would be best to lie down. I could only make out his black nose, which emanated resignation, and I had to laugh. Soon he managed to escape from the attention, and padded along with us, close by my side. It is difficult for a surface dweller to imagine an orphanage like this. I reflected that the children must be happy here. Each one of them had a space of their own with a bed, chest of drawers, and chairs. The assembly hall was huge, with all kinds of musical instruments in it, a climbing frame, and floor cushions. A little boy came and patted my cheek. Someone puts us to bed each night, he told me. They tell us a story and hug and kiss us goodnight. If anyone is upset, they are comforted and hugged more. We get good food and lots of tooth-friendly sweets. Ill children get better very quickly. Somebody always comes to make us better. There was plenty of time for love here. These little children were brought up in a loving atmosphere and encouraged to respond lovingly. It was a wonderful, liberating feeling seeing these orphans growing up surrounded by love. Sometimes children come here from the surface too, Manal told us. Sometimes we collect children who are having difficulties on the surface. They are registered as disappeared and nobody even looks for them. Val sighed and said, if they had only looked after me like this. I'd like to work in this amazing place. We were back in the hovercraft. I had begun to realize how important positive thinking is, not just going with the flow. The power of thought is our strongest weapon and our strongest defense and our only opportunity for creativity, and I mean creativity. It took a long time before I learned to live by thinking and creating through thought. Without Cizela, I don't know how I would have coped with all the education. In a strange, mystical way, knowledge stayed in my head instead of going in one ear and out the other. My memory was reliable, and I learned to increase it in various ways. There was plenty to remember in my new life at this time of change. The next stop was a temple. We were to survey the everyday lives of priests and priestesses, Manal explained. I had already done this. Priests and priestesses always work in pairs here, he continued. Often married couples take on difficult cases. What does difficult entail? Val's question was fairly obvious. Love isn't always as pure as it should be, was Manal's cryptic reply. People have emotional problems here. When difficulties arise, there's always the clergy to talk to, and solutions are found to all problems. As we didn't have any great problems, it was mostly a guided tour of the inner temple, which was beautifully decorated with flowers. I noticed that Val stole up to the altar, crossed himself, and clasped his hands. A persistent seed had been planted in the dark rooms of the Vatican. There wasn't really an altar in the normal sense. There were lovely paintings and a small podium where the two priests were sitting. There were plenty of beautifully arranged flowers. Elementals were fluttering around inside and outside, and the color, perfume, and music contributed to the atmosphere of peace. How old can you get here? Asked Val. Someone suggested hundreds of years, but I can't believe that. He said you look young forever. That's mad. Manal grinned broadly at him. But it's true. The food we eat and the life we live are compatible with the highest principles of life. It's a secret you surface dwellers have never been able to understand. Isn't it boring to live so long? Val's face reflected the suspicion and skepticism which I had felt myself when I first came. I understood him, so I answered, no, it never gets boring. 4 hours of work and 4 singing, dancing, and playing fill the days faster than you can imagine. The tiredness you feel at the end of the day is natural and healthy and makes for a wonderful sleep. I haven't felt bored since I got here. I asked Tyra too, but she just laughed. She didn't seem to understand the question, said Val glumly. I'm going to try to believe you, and I've definitely decided to stay here. I want to see more, I want to see everything. Manal and I exchanged glances and grinned. This boy was shaping up well, and the thought of him destined for priesthood at the Vatican made me shiver. Our hovercraft flew around with us to the airport, the woods, the sea, and small villages. High up in the mountains, gemstone processing took place, polishing and design. Val was like a schoolboy, hanging around the various craftsmen and eating noisily, with obvious delight, the vegetarian food we supplied him with. When we finally came to a stop by the elegant entrance to Porthalagos, Manal exclaimed, now I've shown you life in Telos and its vicinity. It's time for you to learn how to use the power of thought to create what you want, as long as it's positive. What about the fifth dimension? Val wondered. When will I experience that? Not today, anyway. Chuckled Manal. I'm glad you're eager to learn, and in due course you will learn everything. Now we're going into the library for a lesson in the art of creating, for which you will have the best teacher, Arniel. Val jumped, and put his hands to his mouth as if to stifle a yelp. Instead he whimpered, oh dear. Tyra's dad. Is there a men's room where I can make myself presentable? 27. How the earth will change. I sat contentedly the whole way home. It had been a wonderful, if tiring, day, and Titch slept with his head on my lap while I yawned prodigiously. At home, good food awaited me and an affectionate wife, who listened patiently to all I had to recount. She had plenty to talk about, too. When she'd finished, the doorbell rang and a man I'd never met before entered before we could open the door. I guess he was human, because that's how he appeared. But you never know. He sort of glowed. He was tall, but they all are here. He was wearing a shimmering silver cape and a wide, embroidered belt. He had dark, shoulder-length, curly hair and a face that was attractive, but not particularly youthful. His nose was prominent, but shapely. His eyes glittered like jewels. You felt privileged to be on the receiving end of his smile. He stretched out his arms and hugged my wife and then me. The hug was like electricity which left you devoid of anything other than an obvious, gentle now. "T. Alberto Abertes," he announced. My wife added, "The wisest man in the whole of Agartha." "I've come because you're writing a book about our part of the planet Earth," he continued, sitting down in a chair. "My other name means opening. I work alongside the Count Saint Germain and Master Hilarion. I know Cecila's parents, and want to congratulate you on your love union. I also want to discuss the plans we have for the future of the planet, in the limelight at present. Surface dwellers have no idea what to expect, and we need to inform them." I realize something has to be done. I nodded in agreement. Neighboring planets are beginning to feel the effects on the atmosphere caused by the surface dwellers' poisoning, treachery, and such like. Development on the surface has been too negative, agreed our guest. The whole galaxy is on standby. We have worked long and hard to banish the forces of evil, and we have been fairly successful. It's time to increase these earthly energies. They come to prepare you to warn the surface dwellers about what will soon happen. You have an important role in this. Context, Tim, as you are the leader for surface dwellers who come here accidentally. They don't have perception of the problems, and these are numerous. We are going to discuss density. Within physics there are various kinds of density. People have one kind of density, whereas other worlds normally have a lighter density. Our spaceship and what you call spirits and ghosts, for example, have the ability of appearing invisible to you. You have no idea of the invisible life around you. Planet Earth has free will to play with. I use the word play advisedly, as we use free will in many negative ways. On other planets free will is limited and held in check. Violence and egotism aren't allowed. Your will has developed in the wrong direction. You use it for evil and call on powers which shouldn't be allowed to exist. The whole galaxy unanimously believes it is time for the Earth to restructure in a positive way. At this point in time, the work has already commenced. It is high time to cleanse your beautiful planet of all the rubbish which is threatening to suffocate it and Mother Earth. We are going to do this soon. What are you going to do? I asked. Is there really a chance of saving Earth? Yes. His answer echoed in the clear evening air and felt like a sword thrust into all nooks and crannies. He continued, "We will make sure that all your weapons crumble so they can never be used again. Rage and aggression are concepts and feelings which must be banished. You have to realize that these symbols of evil have no place in the world of love which will rule on Earth. Violence must end now. We advise you to live peacefully and spiritually. Your reward for this is to automatically reach a higher level of life. You will have to teach your children at an early stage not to hurt each other and to treat others as they wish to be treated themselves. You will have to practice thinking kind thoughts and being kind. The same goes for your governments. We're already in the process of trying to achieve honest and effective actions in the name of humanity. Stop competing, it's not a race. Very soon, the whole planet will be evacuated. The Earth will move into the fifth dimension and the surface will be purified. As the Earth's frequency increases, electricity will cease to function. There will be mass landings of the Galactic Federation's lightships in towns and the countryside in all countries. All those alive will be taken into the ships. We will divide up the negative and positive souls, the three-dimensional and the five-dimensional, and there will be a great reformation of human souls on Earth. Once you are in the ships, you will be able to witness the transformation of Earth. It will be a fantastic sight. You will come to know things which have been cosmic secrets. I think I'm going to faint, I groaned. Now I realize why I'm here and what I have to do. Many people from above will end up here, right? Exactly. Our new friend smiled. Both you and Cecila will coordinate with the refugees. The new Earth will be expanded to five-dimensional on the inside and the outside. The deserts will disappear and instead there will be tropical paradises. The inside and the surface will be reunited. There will be plenty of world trees. Enter one of these and you enter a beautiful extension of the Earth. I didn't understand that bit, I interrupted in confusion. The trees will have a different environment inside. Are you joking? You might think so, laughed Alberto. Lots of things will happen, but it is too soon to discuss them now as your form is very physical. That will also change. Do you realize that you will be able to see and work with elementals? Absolutely. We're already friends, as is my dog, Titch. Animals see them and regret that you can't. But Mother Earth is eager to transform and take on a new guise not destroyed by human economic transactions, their toxins, and egotistical felling of forests, crucial to wildlife and oxygen production. You should know that our technology is light years ahead of yours. We will share our knowledge when the time is ripe. There will be many alternatives in communication and entertainment. Each household will be supplied with a machine which transforms light energy into matter. It will provide you with clothes and food. There will be prosperity programs which will provide the financial resources necessary. None of this can be revealed in detail before notification of the first wave of changes. You will have new methods of transportation, making cars, trains, and airplanes obsolete. Great changes await transport and infrastructure. New technology will transform medicine. Our technology will reverse the terrible pollution surrounding you. Your entire environment will change fast. There will be no wars. People are brothers and sisters across the world. You will be able to travel across the universe. There will be complete intergalactic cooperation. This is just a fraction of your immediate future. Cecil and Timothy, you must both understand that your powers will be used to the utmost in this amazing transformation, which has been planned by the Galactic Council for thousands of years. I have to leave now, but I will return as we're part of a group who will coordinate on various missions here and on Earth. As quickly as he had come, Master Alberto Abertas, creator of this new epic, vanished. I sat as if stunned, until my wife hugged me. Her face was streaked with tears of happiness. We're the chosen ones who will help the Earth back into the fold of the Creator, the Great Spirit, which is the cosmic source of the universe, she sniffed. I was glad that I would be able to tell grandmother and her husband next morning. They were bound to have a mission too in this changing world. 28. Indian wisdom and the fire of life. Valencio knocked on my door. He appeared totally elated. Manal was behind him, smiling from ear to ear. I've never seen anyone else do this, but he was expert at it. It's going to be an exciting day, exclaimed Val. We're going to meet Indians. Let me go first, boy. Manal scolded. I'll explain. He sat down with me and my wife. Val initiated a hugging session with Titch. Indians have lived in Agartha since the formation of the continent, Manal told us. You've just met one of them, Alberto Abertas, a man you will meet again soon. Indian culture is as old as time and has been appreciated here most of all. Most Indians are 5-dimensional. A very few, those who have only just arrived, are 3-dimensional. The ones who have lived here down the ages are considered the wisest of all. We have secret contact with some present-day tribes. They have entrances from above and tunnels connecting Peru and elsewhere. They have a wonderful communications network. They are considered traditionalists in Agartha. Their wisdom is infinite, their love unconditional, and their culture the best preserved of all. There is one problem, they are suspicious of strangers. That's why Alberto and I are coming, too. If he wasn't with us, they wouldn't let us in. They have suffered such humiliation from the surface that you need reliable references to be allowed into their kingdom. Forget you are the Pope's son, Val. It's considered a disadvantage. TV always loved Indians, objected Val enthusiastically. I read tons of Indian books when I was small and I've always thought they were badly treated. And are still, I added. I'm glad to be meeting them. There are no class conflicts here, Manal continued. We are all equal in the face of the Father. But they don't want bad vibes from surface dwellers. That's happened too often. It won't be a problem if we arrive with Alberto. He'll be here any moment. Here we don't generally use expressions of time like any minute, as Agrans don't live by the clock, but by the signs of nature. But it was only a few minutes before Alberto knocked, and we entered the hovercraft waiting outside. Enter is a good word, although embark would do just as well, as you climb 3 steep steps to get into one of these vehicles, which otherwise looks like an open car without wheels. Titch was used to it now, and he was the first one in, sitting in the front, leaving a tiny space for me. Cecila stayed home, maintaining that she was busy. In actual fact, at my urgent request, she was going to see how the land lay for Val. He was thinking of getting married and was pining for the red-headed madcap, Tyra. Cecil had known Tyra's parents from childhood. The way to Indian country was long, but the loveliness I experienced was nearly devastating. There were no deserts or overgrown wildernesses. The land was cultivated, with regular places for rest and meditation. I've never seen so many varieties of flowers as in Agartha. Manal explained that the profusion of flowers was part of the kingdom's root system. It helped to clean the air, achieving positive energy with its perfumed message and contributing to the inhabitants' well-being. We landed gently. I looked around before Titch pulled impatiently at my sleeve to get out. The air was as balmy as Manal had promised, and the landscape a romantic dream. There were no barriers, just endless mountains, lakes, and tall trees, many in blossom. I could see no compact buildings, just wicker walls entwined with plants. Alberto stepped out of the other hovercraft and welcomed us warmly to his region of Agartha. It was truly lovely. There was an occasional totem pole. These were made of precious stones and weren't exactly like the ones on the surface. The play of sunlight on the multitude of beautifully polished stones was blinding. Around them, also decorated in stones, was semicircular seating with cushions. Alberto explained that people would sit here to meditate. Nothing but the true God was worshipped, the source of all creation. "Here's the fire of life," announced Alberto, indicating a winding path. We followed the path and soon found ourselves on a hillside. Above us, at the top of the hill, there was a building that gleamed so brightly it hurt our eyes to look at it. "The fire of life restores youth and vitality to the visitor," explained Manal. "It bestows upon him great clarity of thought and deed, removing any trace of illness and filling him with joie de vivre. All people should be cleansed by it, but that is unfortunately not possible. The powers that be make those decisions." I thought of grandmother and the story she had told me when I was small, visiting Sweden, about a holy fire that restored youth and happiness. Here it was. I also knew that there was a room in Telos where youth and vigor could be restored. It was obviously considered important in this strange land. Our health is of paramount importance. Without it we are pitiful craft floating on the ocean of life. On the surface we have doctors and hospitals, but I prefer the health centers of Agartha. Manal informed us that all tribes and villages had similar places. Illness contributed to economic markets on Earth, and was completely unnecessary. We would be able to show them later how to heal. Alberto Abertas led us through the peculiar, intertwined village so that I could study its strange construction. There were no castles or manor houses, just round or straight walls glimpsed through overwhelmingly luxuriant foliage. Houses are somewhere to live for us. Here they are incredible constructions, alive with people. We saw people everywhere in gaudy, colorful costumes. They were either running around or busy with old-fashioned jobs. Alberto noticed my confusion, but Valencio anticipated my questions by asking, "How do these people make a living? Are there no factories to produce goods they need?" To me, this feels like going back hundreds of years. "You should know by now that we create all we need," replied Manal abruptly. "We still make our own remedies and cures. Children fall down even here, and people get stomach aches, toothaches, and headaches. Accidents happen and we get hurt just like you. We have medicine for everything. The people here are making herbal remedies, collecting herbs and roots in the forests. Do the Aborigines do the same?" Val asked. "Pretty much," Alberto answered. "We have our own traditions. All tribes, whatever the name, have their own culture, but we share the same God, the source, the creator, the word of love which was the word in the beginning." "Do you have similar places of worship?" It was my turn to ask questions. "The various cultures have intentionally diverse places of worship," replied Alberto. "People have to feel comfortable in their belief, even if the beliefs are compatible. We respect people's differences. If problems arise, we solve them." "You always say that," I protested. "Always can be such an uncertain term. Is there someone to turn to if a problem arises, or are the tears shed inwardly in silence?" "Old Mother Stalyuna is life's servant," replied Alberto. "We'll look in on her and you'll get a better answer than I can give you." In a glade beside a huge rock, a woman was sitting on the grass by a fire. She was stirring a cauldron and tasting its contents from time to time. She was small and so thin that her ribs protruded, and her pale face was so wrinkled that there was hardly room for her eyes, nose, and mouth. You would have expected wisps of hair, but to my surprise, I was completely wrong. Old Mother Stalyuna had a mane a lion would have envied. She had gleaming, black hair with curls around her face. She was quite a sight, and she sounded more like a crowing magpie than a human when she spoke. And yet, her words were as clear as embroidery on an otherwise blank canvas. She looked at each of us in turn, and I could feel her gaze was more intense than you would suppose. To what do I owe the pleasure of a visit from fine, healthy folk? She asked, continuing to stir her brew. I'm busy with a cure for the sick, for those who have lost their way from God. They crawl around like lice on a bronze statue. You don't look lost. Alberto leaned over and whispered in her ear. He was rewarded with a toothless smile and a nod. She removed her hand momentarily from the ladle and pointed with a claw-like nail over her left shoulder. We followed Alberto through branches concealing a hole in a great boulder. It was the entrance to a cave. I was again greeted by a sight I was unprepared for. Val grasped my shoulder and whispered, "What is that?" 29. Old Mother Stalyuna's gift. We were in quite a roomy cavern, tastefully furnished with seating around a high bench. A restful light pervaded in dull colors. Meditation music played softly in the background. There were armchairs, obviously intended for the therapist and patient. The old lady was suddenly sitting in one of the chairs. How she had gotten there was a mystery. "Is that the patient?" she asked, pointing to Val. Titch had crept shamelessly to her side. Her hand, previously so busy stirring, now stroked my dog softly. "If the boy will sit with me a moment, I'll sort out the mess in his head," Old Mother Stalyuna chirped. "He's madly in love, which makes it more difficult." Val sat down reluctantly in the armchair opposite her. Suddenly, the old lady smiled, and her gnarled hands gripped Val's fists. "That'll have to wait, anyway," she announced, grinning. I realized all of a sudden how much the smile lit up her old face, so that it exuded love and no longer appeared so ancient. "It won't be as easy as he thinks, but it will happen in the end. The young puppy will grow into a fine fellow. But don't give up. Don't let anyone else meddle in your life, as that will be your downfall." Valencio didn't dare say a word. He seemed subdued, but not scared. Can't I marry the one I love?" Val asked querulously. The old lady burst out laughing. "The young rascal wants a woman," she exclaimed. "But didn't he hear what I said?" "Not yet. It will happen in due course. Here, now is always now. It can only be like that until the next now is ready. He has to understand that if he's staying." And with that cryptic reply he had to be satisfied. As he got up, the old lady seized his arm. "Don't be in such a hurry. Make haste slowly. Play first before you settle down." True to his upbringing, the Pope's son politely kissed her hand. Old Mother Stalyuna was surprised and delighted. Then she pointed at me. "Come to me, Cecilia's husband. I have something for you." She was still stroking Titch's neck, which he was enjoying to no end. "Sit down," she ordered, as though I were a dog. I did so. "Shut your eyes," she commanded, and I did that too. I felt 2 fingers vibrating on my eyelids and tremendous warmth. "Timothy needs to be able to see more," she explained. "He's married into one of our best families, and he has to be able to keep up. He didn't have the gift, but fate given it to him." She swept her hands once more across my brow, and I felt a sharp pain in my head, then a sensation like falling into something nice and warm. "You'll need to get used to seeing more than usual," she commented. "When you open your eyes, you'll realize that I'm not what I seemed. Open up and have a look." Where had the old witch with the gleaming hair gone? I recognized the raven tresses, but underneath were happy blue eyes regarding me. These looked out from a pretty face, as beautiful as a rose, with a smile revealing pearly white teeth. If I had not worshipped my wife, I would have been pierced by Cupid's arrow immediately. At the edge of this vision were Manol and Alberto, curled up laughing. Valencio was on the floor, his mouth gaping. Titch was with him, licking his ear to restore him to reality, doggy reality, at least. "What a gift you've been given!" Manol exclaimed. "Now you'll be able to see the person inside everyone you meet. You'll become a true judge of character, Tim, and you'll see even more in the future." I rubbed my eyes and turned to hug the beautiful witch, but there were only us visitors there: Manol, Alberto, Val, Titch, and me. I left the cave with the 2 masters as if in a trance. There sat Old Mother Stalyuna, stirring her pot. Simultaneously, I could make out a diaphanous figure at her side, the beautiful girl from the cavern, the girl inside Stalyuna. I rushed to hug the old lady, nearly upsetting the cauldron, but she steadied it swiftly and turned on me resentfully. You're in too much hurry, Cecilia's husband, she hissed. Save your mollycoddling for your wife and go on ferreting about for the Aborigines next. My chortling companions waved farewell to her, and so did Val and I. Old Mother Staljuna didn't take any notice of us, but stayed stirring her pot of herbs. 30. With the Aborigines were at some distance. We had to go in the hovercraft, one called it our Rolls Royce. I had hardly awoken from the enchanted mist of Old Mother Staljuna's when the craft thudded to an abrupt stop. We were in a small valley surrounded by trees. A jumble of boulders lay around, as if strewn there by a giant hand, grass pushing up between them. A wide stream, wide enough to be a river, flowed through the valley. The Aborigines were everywhere, collecting water, bathing, chatting vociferously, clad in little but a loincloth. They called and waved to us in their friendly, happy way. A tall, lithe man, his gleaming brown skin still dripping, came striding towards us. He wore a spotlessly clean, white loincloth of minimal size. Welcome, he called, reaching out a hand. I'm Tumi. You're all very welcome. We're cooking for you over there in the clearing. He pointed towards a small boulder, but we couldn't see much. A little bird told us you were on your way, he continued. There were no birds involved in the deafening concert that started up. 5 naked young boys were playing didgeridoos, those long wind instruments that Aborigines play. Titch buried his muzzle in my arm. The music wasn't really to his taste, but it didn't last long. Then we traipsed after Tumi, who was at least 7 feet tall in his bare feet, around the rocks where an amazing sight met our eyes. A group of lovely, dark-haired girls, clad in flowers, danced and sang around a long table on which all kinds of tempting food was arrayed. I gripped Titch's collar as his eyes lit up and wished I could have restrained Val in the same way, as he seemed inclined to throw himself on the food. Straight away. Luckily, he was too well brought up, in spite of his hunger, and he came and stood behind me instead. This is to honor our guests, cried Tumi. We'll say grace first, and then please eat up. The food nymphs hummed gently as he called loudly and clearly, Thank you, Eternal Father, for your grace in giving us food for ourselves and our honored guests. May all food and drink run through our bodies, rendering them fit for your divine purpose. No life has been sacrificed for this blessed feast, but nature has supplied it from her riches. Thanks, oh thanks. We started in on the food, which could have been made by gods. As we were eating, I noticed something strange. Each person I looked at seemed to radiate their own aura. They were perfectly clear, in various colors. At this juncture, I didn't realize that this was an inner glow revealed to me so that I could read people like a book. This was the gift from Old Mother Staljuna. There was a terrified shriek from Valencio, son of the Pope. He was brandishing a lid, which he had presumably removed from one of the dishes, and was staring in horror at the serving platter. A 10-year-old child, who had noticed our dismay, giggled wildly, removed a worm from the plate and consumed it like spaghetti. It would have been fine if it had been spaghetti. No life had been sacrificed for our feast. It was true. These worms were wriggling with life. Val rushed away, probably to be sick, and I asked Manal, who was standing nearby, what was going on. He grinned in delight. The Aborigines eat a certain type of worm alive. It's considered a real treat. It's the only exception to Agartha's vegetarian diet. You don't have to try it. There are plenty of other dishes. Titch and I exchanged glances. He lay down with his muzzle in his paws. It meant no, I'd lost my appetite, so the dog and I left the table, with a nod from Manal, who didn't seem fond of worm consumption either. The Aborigines continue to eat worms to this day. Tumi followed us, looking concerned. I'm sorry if you didn't appreciate our food, he said, but stay a while. We are going to dance at the edge of the forest. We have story dances. Many of our legends are exceptionally lovely, and we have set them to music of our own composition. We will eat sunstone bread at the same time. It's guaranteed worm-free. We laughed, and accepted his invitation. He took us to an open-air theater where we sat down on a grassy slope. We've plenty of amphitheaters in Italy, Val commented. It's lovely here. At the bottom of the slope was a natural stage, surrounded by trees, with a babbling brook flowing between glistening stones. We were given bread and drink which tasted wonderful. The beautiful dancing girls returned, graceful and gentle. Then there were trolls and creeping figures with animal masks. The girls were scared off before our horrified eyes, and a gruesome scene replaced them. It was a war between the forces of good and evil, fought violently. It was horribly realistic, and I noticed that Val had shut his eyes. The special effects were amazing, and body parts, heads, arms, and legs, floated around. On closer inspection, it was apparent that puppets were used. There was a happy ending, the blaring music calmed down, and the girls returned with their cheerful dance. Our two masters thanked Toomey for the refreshments and entertainment and explained that we had to go. Soon we were back in the Rolls-Royce, a light breeze smelling of the sea below us. What did we learn from the Aborigines? Val asked. Eating worms, yuck. But it was fun, too. You learned how people live at one with nature, how they create music and drama, and how they are satisfied with their lives, Manal pointed out. We're going home now, and we'll carry on tomorrow. 31. The birthplace of mankind, Africa. Occasionally, we find ourselves in a land directly beneath the earthly kingdom which is its birthplace, remarked Manal, slightly obscurely, as we were sitting in the hovercraft the next day. Where would that be? I wondered. Africa, was the answer. Africa is enormous, with many lands and innumerable tribes, Valencio observed thoughtfully. Where exactly are we going? You'll see in a moment, Alberto replied in a tone of voice that brooked no argument. The craft swooped gently down onto sand sculpted by the wind into wide circles in all directions. This was unmistakably the desert. That's all we need, I thought, a tribe from the African desert. I sat on the steps of our vehicle trying to remove the sand from Tich's muzzle. Val and the two masters walked around the seemingly uninhabited spot until we all heard a loud, shrill call that became more resonant. As if from nowhere, there appeared dark-skinned warriors armed with crescent-shaped spears. They were naked, apart from loincloths, and their skin gleamed in the sun. They were painted with white stripes and other characters, and had feathers on their heads. Some of them had feathers fastened behind, giving the impression of birds. They rolled their eyes and seemed terrifying. Val moved closer to the masters, who were holding out their hands towards the tribe. To my surprise, I noticed rings of light swarming around their hands like huge insects. The tribe took a step back and fell to their knees in front of Alberto and Manal. The rings of light had obviously made an impression. A man at least 7 feet tall got up from the group and approached us. I couldn't understand what he said, but Alberto spoke to him. It was a long conversation. In the end, the tall man beckoned us to follow him, which we did. We were still in the desert, but it was no longer empty. Small, conical huts were silhouetted against the intense blue sky, smoke arising from them. A young woman with ebony skin and tightly curled hair piled high on her head approached us. She was strangely beautiful in her foreign way. She wore a gold cloth at her waist, was painted in yellow and gold, and was weighed down with jewelry. She stood before the masters, and they all bowed to each other. Gold glittered from her arms, neck, and waist, and on her feet were gold sandals laced high up her legs with gold ribbon. Her skin was even darker than the tall man's. This is Yola, the Gold Queen, the tall man introduced her. You are in Nuria, the birthplace of mankind. From here all races on the earth originated. We could understand him, and we understood what the Gold Queen said when she started talking. We sat on the sand, and she perched on a sort of woven gold throne that was brought for her and which gleamed like the sun. You strangers desire to see the birthplace, she said, in more strident tones than we had expected. This village was created so long ago that the surface of the earth was still not formed. Heaven created us in his image. Heaven took the trouble of giving us human inheritance. We went to the surface, where we were betrayed and disappointed. The survivors returned here. People who we were going to confirm as true children of heaven betrayed us with the help of the evil king's war, power, and selfishness, and he remained in power. His name was Anu and his followers were called the Anunnaki. He and his followers have finally fled to their own planet. People on the surface will be given the chance to become what was originally intended. The children of heaven will regain their origin. Anu held them fettered by evil, and the evil brought darkness of thought and feeling. Some of the children of heaven luckily managed to retain their generosity, love, and integrity, and they will help us now. We have grieved for the earth as a cherished relative, but our grief has changed to joy. We have great help from other planets and we're planning a UFO visit to enlighten the surface dwellers about their wonderful inheritance. As above, so below, I interrupted her. Where does that come from? It's the very first decree which heaven taught us, the queen replied. That's how it was meant to be, and will be in the future. Knowledge meant ego triumphed over spirit, that is what happened. It was warm, like a hot summer's day on the surface. We were treated to cooling drinks and lively conversation with the attractive Queen Mother, as she turned out to be, and her court. On the surface, we don't believe that the earth is so ancient and its culture so extensive. Yola had a choir which sang madrigal-like songs. They were herding songs from the goat herders. The goats had longer horns and shorter coats than we are used to because of the heat. The village was sizable and scattered across a wide area. The sand dunes and the desert finished pretty much where we had landed. Long grass and flowers replaced it further on, including a cactus resembling an orchid which I had never seen before. The people were such a mixture, both black and white. Yola explained that it was heaven's original plan that all people should live together, but that differences increased as the surface was populated. As we entered the town, the houses changed. Here there were more normal houses, almost like English cottages, with clay walls and thatched roofs. Chimneys didn't exist, as it was so hot and food was cooked outside. The kitchens were like booths, but to judge from the food, they were perfect for cooking in. By the time we were ready to go, we were almost overwhelmed by music, great vegetarian food, and the joy emanating from this magical place. "Are we going to China, too?" the inquisitive Val asked. Manal chuckled. "Not until tomorrow. Now it's time to get home before Cizela thinks we've gotten lost in the jungle." At home was another surprise. I was welcomed by my friend Chaos from Dalarna in Sweden. Behind him was my dear wife. "I'm organizing a party," she announced. "Travelers need refreshments and food. You two can have a chat while I'm getting it ready. I've sent a message to Emily that we have a visitor." Chaos had quite a tale to tell. He'd already befriended Cizela and was delighted by my life companion. I asked him how he found his way to us, and he replied, "For a while, everything was normal at home. But after you and your grandmother left, it wasn't fun anymore. Emily and I had discussed Agartha, and I got hold of all the information I could on it. There wasn't much. Then I booked a flight to Mount Shasta, and here I am. It was a bit hairy before I reached Telos and started asking people for you. Everyone knew who you were. It's great here. I don't know how long I'll be staying, maybe for good. What do you think? Sorry for your Swedish friends who will miss you, and I'm ecstatic that you've come," I exclaimed, hugging him. I told him about the amazing, magical kingdom he had come to, and invited him to stay as long as he liked. It took half the night to recount our adventures here. Sweden seemed very far away, but grandmother was overjoyed to see our friend and she also had much to relate. 32. A completely different China. Both grandmother and I found that our memories had been renewed. This book is a product of that renewal. It's easy to forget your old life when your new one is in paradise. The following morning, Manal and Arniel picked us up for our next voyage into Agartha the Enchanted. As far as I could understand, land and sea on the surface were paralleled by land and sea here inside. We therefore expected China to be approximately where it was on the surface. However, nothing in Agartha is that obvious. Everything is very different than how it is on the surface. I had never actually been to China, only read about it and seen it in films. Both masters quickly introduced themselves to Chaos. Grandmother and Lex came too, so my Rolls-Royce was joined by another hovercraft that I referred to as the Audi. This amused Manal and Arniel. I don't know what I'd expected, but Titch and I alighted in the market square of a town. It was a large square, with other hovercraft parked around an attractive fountain. The Audi drew up next to the Rolls and Chaos wobbled out, holding his head. Flying in a hovercraft is disorientating. Laughing, I put my arm around his shoulder and Titch added his support, nudging and shoving him. My enormous dog stood on his hind legs as though surveying the situation. He had taken instantly to Chaos and probably remembered him from Sweden. The jumbled images I remembered seeing of contemporary China were nothing like what I saw here. At one side of the lovely fountain with its two life-size dolphins, a wide, gleaming street opened up. On the other side were bright, glittering roofless houses, climbing plants, and palm trees. A river ran down the middle of the broad street. In the distance were bridges, high, humpbacked bridges, also glittering. The people around were tall, attractive, and well-built. They were indeed dark-haired and dark-eyed, with high cheekbones, but they seemed to be made from mother of pearl. They were clad in fairly long cloaks in pale colors. There was no crowding. They all walked separately, bowing continuously and smiling in all directions. If this is where China came from, I thought the country should return to its roots. The master saw our surprise. All of us had our mouths hanging open, Val, Chaos, grandmother, Lex, and I. We couldn't have been more flabbergasted. The masters beckoned us to hover across the street with them. The Chinese greeted us, bowing, and we tried to return their greetings as best we could. Titch gravitated to my side, raising a laugh when he bowed his head from time to time. Many Chinese had pets with them, and yet the street was quiet and peaceful. The pets were like ours, mostly cats and dogs and a few donkeys with bejeweled saddlecloths. We stopped by a building which resembled one of the temples painted onto old Chinese porcelain. It glowed in pinkish hues and was bathed in light. If this is where the Chinese come from, it's changed drastically on the surface, I muttered, and the others nodded in agreement. The outer world has the ability to transform, Arniel assented. That is why it must change again, in a positive way. We entered the temple. A pleasant incense aroma greeted us. It wasn't at all like a church inside, there was no altar and no pews. Instead, there were comfortable stools on a beautiful carpet. In the center was a golden rostrum studded with precious stones. Gentle music caressed us. It was empty but for the lovely, long-haired cats lying across the stools, regarding us with feline shrewdness. They weren't upset by Titch. I held on to him just in case, but he glanced at them nonchalantly and yawned. You are welcome to meditate a while or just sit in quiet contemplation, Manuel explained. We have these places all over Agartha. We call it sanctuary. This is exactly what we need on the surface. Grandmother broke the silence. It's exactly what we're planning, Arniel commented. It'll take time, but great changes are coming to the earth. Different religions must come to an end. The most sacred place is inside us and can be discovered in a space like this. You can sense God here, my little grandmother remarked, putting her hands together. Amen. Do you envisage God as a kind of master? Val asked. I do too. Actually, he's in another dimension watching over us constantly, grandmother announced with conviction. Manuel looked at her and smiled. That's not really the image of God we have here, he pointed out gently. God is inside us all. We only have to listen to the voice of love. That's what Arniel meant. Val sank down onto a stool, his head in his hands. I think he was crying. Compared to his tough religious upbringing, this was heaven sent. Grandmother and her husband sat down too, clasping their hands as we surface dwellers are wont to do. In the end, all of us rested on the soft, carpeted temple floor. Titch had his head in his paws and I knew he was content. Then we left. The whole town was a great, bright, joyous experience. We didn't meet any wise men or women, just happy, fulfilled people, children and adults. There weren't many traces of contemporary China to be detected in the original. It's the same with Japan, Arniel said. We just wanted to show you how far negative influences have succeeded on the surface. However, each country has a soul where part of the original is preserved. That's why it's not too late to save the earth. What exactly is going to happen? Val was obstinate. He was looking for the truth. Arniel smiled. Preparations are taking place now, hence the hurry to show you the original. The earth is entering a new phase, which will be full of disaster. Afterwards, the earth won't look the same. It will be transformed and regain the enchanting beauty it once had. What about the people? Val was still on the case. What will happen to the Pope and the rest of the Vatican? Their destinies depend on their own choices, my boy. Many will end up here in Agartha. Some will relocate to other planets. There will unfortunately be many deaths, but even the souls of those people have a destiny. I don't really want to bring my dad here, mumbled Val, but it was a shame my Uncle Riemford didn't like it here. We had returned to our vehicles by this time and taken our seats, so the discussion ended. It was a hot day, unusually so for the climate here. I pointed this out and Manuel replied. It's a result of climate change on the surface. We feel the difference more often now. It never used to happen. For the first time in thousands of years we are feeling the influence of all the hate and anger which pulsates on the surface and penetrates through the Earth's crust. We are still protected from the negativity radiated by the surface, but as more surface dwellers find their way here, we are bound to feel the influence. We are forced to batten down the hatches and wait for D-Day, when we will make ourselves known to the surface and try to save its inhabitants. I was just in time, thank goodness. Chaos exclaimed. PM hungry, Val announced, looking around the house. We had all come home in order to sit and discuss the events of the day. Only the masters had gone. P. Get something to eat, said Cizela. Sit down at the table and there will be food. Can't I get the food? Val asked, searching around the kitchen. There's nothing to cook here. I love cooking and I've cooked a couple of times at Edmund's house, only I'm not allowed to cook meat there. Not here, either, replied Cecila hastily. I'll create whatever vegetables you need, just tell me. My wife and Val spent some time in secret and produced excellent food for us. Val had insisted upon boiling, frying, and roasting, with brilliant results. The surface has lost a great chef, I commented, patting the young man on the shoulder. How do you think I survived before I got here? The money I stole from the Vatican didn't last long. I cooked in a few places, learning as I went along. I know that the residents of Telos create food by thought, but I love to use my hands as well. We enjoyed the meal, but my wife was exhausted by creating all the ingredients, some previously unknown to her. Grandmother was most impressed, and she kept eating and kept praising Val, suggesting he should become a master chef. It was fun. Val's entire face glowed with pride. I'll gladly do it again. It's boring not cooking. It's so organized here. We can't just eat when we want. Cecila stared at him doubtfully. We've always found that easiest, she said. If you have a different suggestion, you should talk to the masters. I don't think they'd stop you from doing something you enjoy. You might teach us all something. Let's open a restaurant, exclaimed grandmother in delight. Val can be chef. I know it would be a huge success here, even without money involved. And that is exactly what we did, although possibly not quite as Emily had imagined. But that is another story. 33. Another encounter with Saint Germain. I had always found working 9 to 5 very boring and could understand the lore of the sea for my father. It was unpredictable, exciting, and full of challenges. I'm not cut out for sitting at a desk doing accounts or organizing jobs for others, which are a waste of time. I want to surge forward, altering the plan of action, helping out, and playing with wind and water. I want to be myself without it becoming an ego trip. My new job gave me this opportunity. It also brought me the opportunity to grow, to see things in a different light, and to learn to live by cosmic laws instead of prejudiced and restrictive laws stipulated by people. I've always been interested in life, and now I had someone to be interested with. Manuel had prepared me for visiting Saint Germain again. Apparently I had more to learn from this wise man. While I waited for Manuel, and my wife was getting ready to come, my life up to the present ran through my mind for some reason. When I joined my father at sea on that fateful journey, my plans for the future were all decided. I was definitely going to follow in his footsteps. I wanted to be captain of a ship, at peril of the high seas. My plans were amorphous and naive, and I knew my mother didn't want another sailor in the family. I thought I'd be able to convince her and my sister, but that's not what happened. When Manuel saved my life, my plans changed. There were new expectations, new discoveries, new targets and challenges. My thoughts and feelings focused on fitting into a totally new life inside the earth. Right from the beginning I loved it and didn't bother with profound spiritual problems. I'd always believed God was a positive power, without needing a religion. It worked for me. Since meeting Cecila, love has come to the fore. Agartha doesn't have religions, at least nothing which is forced on others. In the small temples I always feel happy and positive about life. I've left a lot of relationships behind. I don't often think about my friends on the surface, because my beloved grandmother is here and she represents all the friends and relatives I need. I missed chaos, but it's great now he's here. I thought about my new friends down here. Manuel was the first one I met, and from the moment he rescued me and I came around in the boat, we'd become firm friends and will always remain so. Arniel is also a good friend. He has such a good sense of humor and is easygoing. Lex and Edmund, with their Indian roots, are lovely friends who I would like to know more. Valencio is a brilliant venture. He is like a son and is very versatile. I considered how the short time I've been in Agartha, which is actually many years, has brought me such a lot, and I'm deeply grateful to life for dealing me this hand and giving me the most wonderful wife in the world. Are you sitting and cogitating all on your own? Cecila laughed, hugging me. I glanced at her. She was a sight for sore eyes, hazy and shimmering white. Fresh roses replaced jewelry across her chest. Seeing my face, she laughed again. Don't worry about the poor flowers. I've borrowed them from a bush and Pei put them back when we return. You don't mind a bit of magic. It was a great honor to be meeting Saint Germain. I realized there must be good reason for him to see us, I just couldn't fathom it. I soon found out. Saint Germain the Master was impressive. We were conducted to one of the small, bejeweled temples to be found everywhere on this strange continent. Clad in a white cloak with numerous emblems and decorations, he greeted us and invited us to be seated on a round, emerald green couch in the middle of the temple. Titch had stayed with grandmother, just in case. His expressions of joy could be violent and undignified in such company. What a shame Titch isn't here, the dignified master commented, laughing warmly. You may have been expecting a telling off, but you shouldn't, you've earned the opposite, which Cecila is beautiful living proof of. I congratulate you on your conquest of one of the loveliest girls here. Her beauty is not skin deep, it's 5-dimensional. You aren't 5-dimensional yet, and that's why you're here. It is tiresome that Cecila has to constantly transform between dimensions, but this should not separate you. I thought I would become 5-dimensional with time, I remarked doubtfully. It doesn't work like that, Saint Germain said, smiling. Being 5-dimensional physically and intellectually has to be learned. This is necessary in your case. Your in-laws knew this when they approved your love union. Today you must make a choice. Do you want to transform to the 5th dimension and remain in Shambhala with your wife and future children, or do you want to stay in Telos where your friends are and meet your wife occasionally? This came as a shock, but I didn't hesitate. I want to transform, and live with Cecila in Shambhala, I replied. My wife found my hand and squeezed it. Saint Germain and Manal both beamed. It means being apart for a while, Saint Germain continued. The education and treatment which Timothy needs doesn't take place here. He has to go to the House of Transformation in the mountains. He has to go at once. PD liked to tell grandmother, I remonstrated. I can't leave without explaining why or telling her how God really is. Manal will explain to her where you are and tell her that the God within us is the only true God, the master decided. I'm sure she'll look after Titch for you. Valencia will help her. Cecila will be at her parents' house while you are away. When you return, she will have found a home in the capital for you and the child. I almost jumped out of my skin. What child? I cried, staring at my light wife. Cecila crept onto my lap. Sorry. Saint Germain got there before me. She whispered. I haven't told a soul, least of all him, but he knows everything. You will be back in time for your son's birth. Saint Germain smiled and I felt quite peeved. He really did know everything. Timothy, say goodbye to Cecila and Manal, and then come with me. What about that job you offered me? I exclaimed resentfully. I would really like it. That was before you decided to become 5-dimensional, Manal consoled me. You'll get a better job after this, and you'll be able to see twice as far. Your friends will have to decide which dimension they wish to live in, but it will take longer for them to become 5-dimensional. The usual course takes place in our wonderful library, Portholagos. You will soon be reunited, but you must leave your wife just now. It was really tough, but it couldn't be helped. I hugged her firmly. Cecila dried a stubborn tear which had rolled down her cheek and then she left the temple abruptly. Even Manal had gone, and I was left with the honored master, Saint Germain. He took my hand, smiled warmly, and said, let's go. In a swift moment of swirling mist I found myself at the House of Transformation, high up in a snowy world where rays of sunshine found it difficult to penetrate the dense pine forest, only to be compared with Sweden's most northerly, most fair, and most luxuriant forest. Saint Germain and I stood side by side before a building that seemed carved out of the cliff face itself, the grayest, most closely veined and glinting marble I have ever come across. 34. The House of Transformation. This book should end here, but I know that the House of Transformation is a name that will whet the appetite of my readers, so I feel that you must come with me. Everything had happened so quickly that I had no time to wonder what was waiting for me. It had all been so unexpected, so unpredictable. I followed Saint Germain in bewilderment and looked around me. The door was opened by a smiling man in a white cloak. He didn't have the shaved head of a monk. His hair cascaded in black waves to his shoulders. He bowed low to the master and indicated with his hand the direction we should take. We were in a light, pillared hall where the walls, doors, and roof seemed to be made of crystal. A crystal cavern, I thought. In the center of this enormous hall a fountain was playing, shooting forth multicolored water from a huge colorful shell. On closer investigation, the shell was open, glinting, rosy mother of pearl, with a shimmering pearl inside. It was the loveliest fountain I have ever seen. Saint Germain smiled while I admired the fountain, and then gestured for us to continue. Breathless with delight, I enjoyed the colors from outside reflected in all the glass. We went up stairs of glass covered in shimmering green carpet to keep us from slipping. I hadn't noticed before, but there were rugs on the floor to walk on. These were soft and shimmering, and served a purpose in this glass palace. We entered a door at the top of the stairs. This was a much smaller glass room, carefully lit. There were cushioned benches and a smooth wall of white marble, which I realized served as a screen. In front of this was a glass rostrum like a pulpit. I recognized the couple on it. I had met them at a party in Telos. We embraced as old friends, and Saint Germain observed, "This is the classroom in the House of Transformation. I'm going to leave you, Timothy, in the capable hands of your friends, and we'll meet again when you've finished." He kissed me on both cheeks. Then he left in the usual way, he just vanished. Thus my conversion to the fifth dimension began. It was an enjoyable, exciting time if demanding, and I never had time to be bored, even when I missed Cecila. We would soon be together again, and I was going to be at my son's birth, as promised. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to tell you how I became five-dimensional after an edifying slog. It's still classified information, but hopefully one day the whole of humanity will be able to share in this wonderful, cleansing experience. Joy is a major part of it, nothing boring. Continuous joy, laughter, song, music, dance, and the easy unity of the body and soul make life indescribably happy. My dear reader, if you don't believe what I have told you in this book, sit silently and listen to your inner voice. You will hear this in your own head and feel it in your heart if you seriously want to know if Agartha really exists. I assure you it does, but why believe me? You can find out for yourself. The time is coming when Agarthans will come to the surface as living proof. I'm laughing now. Gravity and humor coexist. Sometimes seriousness spills over into laughter, but hardly ever the reverse. Lighten up about your dignity, your capacity for influencing others, which is a form of control, and your wish to remain non-committal about belief and knowledge. Recognizing the God within you should go without saying. God equals the person or force in what you call heaven, an endless mass of constellations and planets of uninhabited gas bubbles. I'm telling you, God is everywhere. God is in your wonderful surroundings, which we want to conserve for the future, in the flora and fauna outside your house, which are so natural you no longer notice them. The whole of this beautiful, divine creation is being totally destroyed by people. This is a distressing image of the planet's surface. Should we accept it? We can't. The cosmos is reacting. A cosmic council exists, unknown to us. It won't accept that this blindingly lovely planet Earth is rent asunder by filthy hands seeking power and riches, instead of taking care of what there is. Dear reader, this book is to awaken a new consciousness in you, so that in these troubled times you can love the world. Think how you can help, and leave behind your apathy and selfishness. Love and empathy are the first steps on the road we must take. There are 6 other steps besides: appreciation, compassion, forgiveness, humility, understanding, and valor. Practice these 6 heart virtues and you will feel the fine winds of change embrace your body and soul. I, Timothy from the 5th dimension, and Agartha, the 8th continent, have told you my story truthfully and passionately. Every word I have uttered is true, and through my medium, Mariana, I have brought the whole of humanity greetings from another kingdom. Agartha greets all brothers and sisters and looks forward to a future of joyful, friendly cooperation. 35. Author's epilogue. I realize that many readers will doubt that Agartha really exists. So far it is very difficult to prove, but remember that in the past we stubbornly believed the world was flat. Timothy has been my friend. He first appeared in my home when I was sitting on my meditation sofa. I could see him clearly for a fraction of a second, and I'm not one to hallucinate. He was a young man of Nordic appearance, tall and blond, with a lovely, friendly face and strange, penetrating blue eyes. I didn't have time to see much more, but perceived that he was wearing white trousers and a white, ribbed polo neck. I could hear him quite clearly in my head. "My name's Timothy. Originally I'm from Seattle, but I live in Agartha these days," he said, "the world inside the earth. The earth is hollow, don't you know? Agartha is a huge kingdom with many entrances, one of which is on Mount Shasta in California. The reason people don't know about this world is that we've kept it secret to protect it. We don't want war or environmental toxins here like on the surface. We've created a toxin-free, monolith, flowering landscape, and we want to keep it that way. The day is coming when we will contact you people on the surface, and you must write this book as preparation. Some people have already discovered us, including Admiral Richard E. Byrd. If you read this book, you will have some insight into the truth and love which are our realities. You will see how we live and it will be easier to understand. There are other books about Agartha in English by Diane Robbins, Telos and Messages from the Hollow Earth.